think they were sleeping, Sean. What time's the 7 o'clock meeting start? 7 o'clock. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, everybody. Welcome to New Freedom. Welcome to Position of Neutrality. We open every session of Position of Neutrality with a prayer, and Chaplain Lee is in the house.
Come on and stand to your feet all over the room, please. Father, we thank you on tonight. We welcome you into this house. We ask you, Lord, to have your way in this place. Touch the hearts of each and every one that's here and those that are on their way. God, we come in with a rejoiceful spirit, rejoicing in all that you have done, but most of all for what you're about to do. We ask you, Lord, to use your manservant as he delivers on tonight, step one, where we begin from the beginning, recognizing the things for us to do on this journey. We thank you and we give you the praise, glory, and honor, and we just ask you, Lord, just to have your way. Move through these aisles, touch the hearts of each and every one that's here. Help them to receive what you have for us. And we thank you, we praise you, we give you all the glory in the mighty name of Jesus. Let everyone say, amen.
We got some sound feeding back into here. Is that you on it? That sounds better. Not quite as busy. So welcome, everybody. Anyone here for the first time tonight? Oh, yeah. Good. A bunch of you. So, first of all, welcome. And second, let us warn you in advance. You're liable to experience us just a little different than other meetings of other fellowships you may have attended. The primary reason that's liable to happen is that we intend for you to have a different experience here. What we do here, we've been doing for lots of years, not just here, but other places. We take a look at suggested instruction for a step or so a week directly out of this book, and we use this book in 12-step recovery. Why? Because it works. Yeah, the process described by the authors of this book has been proven to work for addicts of the hopeless variety, addicts to alcohol and other substances, yes? So what we do here is what the authors say in the foreword to the first edition, which we'll look at to show others precisely how we recovered is the main purpose of this book. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how I find my experience within their experience and encourage you to have yours. And if we both do our job, we'll share our spiritual experience in this room tonight. How many of you have been here before and can witness for folks that happen? So by a show of hands, those of you online can't see their hands, but those of you in the room, you saw it. They're talking to you by their show of hands. When we speak to you of a spiritual experience, we're talking about a sensory experience. You will feel it. And when you do, I'll know. And I'll call it to your attention because we would cheat you to talk to you about this power we call God without giving you a demonstration of the power. The other thing we do here, so as not to confuse, is when I say God, you say because what we're really talking about is not theology, but relationship with a power greater than us found within us. So sometimes we confront prejudice, and so rather than lose someone to prejudice, we want to focus on what this really is. If tonight's admission is one of powerlessness, the solution to that problem would be power, right? So that's what we're going to do. Just take a look at that tonight. So let's go to the foreword to the first edition, and let's check to make sure I wasn't lying to you in the opening. So forward to the first edition, we of Alcoholics Anonymous are more than 100 men and women who have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. Have any of you ever been told that we are we? It's a common misconception in fellowships. We're not trying to pick at people, but they've told us clearly who we is. And if I've sat in rooms and haven't had the experience they said, that would explain why, because I'm not them. I didn't do what they did. They are going to tell me later in the text, rarely have we seen a person fail who's thoroughly followed our path. So I'm going to have to do some of that to lob onto their promise, aren't I? So it's good to know that this is who's telling the story. It's not me telling the story. It's not you telling the story. It's them telling the story. That's why it's important for me to find myself in that, because at some point I said I want what they have and I'm willing to go to any lengths to get it. Right? So it had to understand what it was they had and I have to read their writing because they're all dead. Does that make sense? Okay. So it says, to show other alcoholics precisely how we have recovered is the main purpose of the book. So if you wonder why we do things like we do, we break down every sentence, we ask you questions in between, because it's precise instruction, and a lot of stuff can escape us until someone calls it to our attention. Have you noticed that? All right, so I'm going to jump from there to the doctor's opinion, which is found in your book, XXV, Roman numeral 25. If you're following in a book. And if you're not following in a book, that's okay. Yeah, you can, but I might mislead you. So I always suggest you get a book, because if you give me the power to think for you, you may end up somewhere other than you intended. Yeah, Sean brings up a good point. Did you go to the trap house and say, here's my money, do it for me, tell me how it feels? If you weren't that guy, you probably ought to get your own book. Okay. So the word we again, we of Alcoholics Anonymous believe that the reader will be interested in the medical estimate of this plan of recovery described in this book. So who'd they tell us we was? The first 100 who have recovered. It says, convincing testimony must surely come from medical men who have had experience with the sufferings of our members and have witnessed our return to health. Do you agree with them? I like going into peer groups, and I like listening to the stories of others who experienced this redemption and are in a better place where I'd like to be, but I'd still like to hear what the doctor's got to say too. Yeah. Make sense? So it says, a well-known doctor, chief physician at a nationally prominent hospital specializing in alcoholic and drug addiction, gave Alcoholics Anonymous this letter. So this is from Dr. William Silkworth, a leading physician at the time. There was no diagnosis of addictive disorder or alcoholism at that time, but he operated in the theory that there was more going on than bad behavior. Does that make sense? So it says, to whom it may concern, I have specialized in the treatment of alcoholism for many years. That seems commonplace today, but remember, there was no treatment of alcoholism in that day. So this guy devoted his life to serve a cause for people like us to have a place to go and call home, even before there was anybody in his peer group who believed it was a thing. This guy is what you call a servant. Does it make sense? In late 1934, I attended a patient who, though he had been a competent businessman of good earning capacity, was an alcoholic of a type I had come to regard as hopeless. So many years in the field, upon meeting Bill Wilson, he's looking, oh yeah, this guy's got a chance. How many docs did any of you meet along the way that told you if you kept doing what you were doing, it was going to end badly? They didn't have any other suggestions for us, though, did they? It's not say you should not pick up no matter what. They did not understand the complexities of that plan for a guy like me. Lots of things come up. So in the course of his third treatment, he acquired certain ideas about concerning a possible means of recovery. So Bill Wilson, the author of the majority of this book, the whole team, the first 100, helped him author it, but he did put the pen to paper and they talked about it. I called to your attention who Bill is because I want you to understand if you've had a few goes at recovery and you felt bad on your return, that the author of this book was in his third treatment. Any of you been here, were really dead serious about it, then all of a sudden you weren't? As part of his rehabilitation, he commenced to present his conceptions to other alcoholics, impressing upon them that they must do likewise with still others. Bill took these suggestions that he had been shown and he started sharing them with his other patients in the environment in which he had just come from. Does that make sense? Yep. How many of you have been in a psych lockdown along the way? Did you notice that they didn't encourage us to talk to the other patients? You just sit there and be quiet. We'll let you know. They let him. So something there opened a door. Pay attention to that, okay? This has become a basis of a rapidly growing fellowship of these men and their families. So they've told us what the fellowship is. Peers, having shared in a redemptive experience, share that with still others, and that's why it's rapidly growing. This man and over 100 others appear to have recovered. Now the doctor is offering an opinion, and from his standpoint, recovered meant an end to suffering. But as the authors talk about it, they talk about a different meaning of the word recovered. They're talking about a redemption, taking what was thought waste and extracting something infinitely valuable. Any of you have been through your step process, started sharing your gnarliest things with others and lifted them up? Is that not a redemption? That's what the authors meant when they spoke of being recovered. They didn't misspeak. It's not recovering, it's recovered. Because I've taken from a scrap heap what was thought waste, and I've found something infinitely valuable. Yes? Some of you are feeling that. Who's feeling that? There you go. That's the power we call God around here. When they feel it, I know, and it's because we share the same spirit. There's one who has all power. That one is? Okay. You guys are good. Okay, so I'm going to jump out of the doctor's letter, and I'm going to go to the author's opinion of the doctor's opinion, mainly because it always cracks me up why alcoholics and addicts always have an opinion about everyone else's opinion. I know you've got the degrees, Doc, but I have an opinion about that. Okay, so we're on the author's opinion of the doctor's opinion. Ready? The physician who at our request gave us this letter has been kind enough to enlarge upon his views in another statement which follows. In this statement, he confirms what we who have suffered alcoholic torture must believe, that the body of the alcoholic is quite as abnormal as his mind. When I ingest alcohol, it has an abnormal effect on me. Do I have any drinkers in the room? Did you find that when you ingested alcohol, it had a tendency to energize you? Yes. It is a sedative. See, people make jokes about this, but they've told us from their testimony, this is something we must believe. I must believe I'm part of that class. Who's my heroin addicts, my opiate addicts? Did you guys find that that stuff kind of gave you a little pep in your step? Yeah. That's an abnormal reaction to a powerful sedative. Where's my meth addicts? All you had to do is hit that pipe or slam a bit, and all of a sudden you were calmed down, huh? Do I need to call to your attention calming down when you slam meth is an abnormal reaction to meth? Listen, that you have in common with all of us. We all lose our clothes somehow. It's magical. Can't tell the meth addicts from the drunks once that happens, huh, Sean? Everybody ends up with no pants. Avoid homelessness. It was obvious I was acting crazy, but I thought I was acting. I didn't know I really was crazy. Any of you know what I'm talking about? Come to. No wonder these guys believe I'm so nuts. I'm freaking nuts. These things were true to some extent, so yes, we acted that way. We did it to either get attention or to push people away, didn't we? We did it for all kinds of reasons. In fact, to a considerable extent with some of us. How many of you at some point decided I'm going to quit acting this way and found you couldn't? But we're sure that our bodies were sickened as well. In our belief, any picture of the alcoholic which leaves out this physical factor is incomplete. It's why we're spending so much time tonight. There's no point in running out of here and say, yeah, I'm an addict, and using it as an excuse instead of an admonition that I need to get some redemption or I'm going to die an ugly, horrible death and I'm going to let down everyone that's ever cared about me. Because the gravity of that should hold us, right? Because all of us had a desire to not behave that way and an absolute inability to manifest any outward action, or we don't get here, right? So the doctor's theory that we have an allergy to alcohol interests us. Are you more interested now that we've explained to you what allergy means in medical speak? Because I always thought an allergy was, oh, you know, I eat a peanut and my throat, right? I didn't know we were just talking about an abnormal reaction out of the normal class. So I just thought it was a joke. I drank, I got break out in handcuffs. Except I didn't break out in handcuffs every time I drank. Yeah? Okay. As laymen, our opinion as to its soundness may, of course, mean little. So we're admitting we don't have the body of knowledge the medical people have, but our experience confirms what the doctor's trying to say. I do respond differently. Yes? But as ex-problem drinkers, we can say that his explanation makes good sense. You'll never be able to move into a conscious relation with a power greater than you, within you, without it making sense. That's why we need to make clear the case they lay out so you can examine it with your logical senses and move into it logically with your mind. That's what it means to get into a conscious relation. I understood it. I knew the cost. I went anyway. Yes? It explains many things for which we cannot otherwise account. Though we work out our solution on the spiritual as well as the altruistic plane, we favor hospitalization for the alcoholic who is very jittery or befogged. Some things are beyond my peer skills. Medical people need to manage those early stages of detox because depending on what you're detoxing from, they can be very dangerous. That's what they're saying. And they're saying an altruistic as well as a spiritual plane. As you go out and serve, you'll figure out what they're talking about. I do a lot of things altruistically, but they may not be selflessly. Everything I do in the Spirit is selfless, and I can't do that. The Spirit has to do it through me. Does that make sense? So more often than not, it's imperative that a man's brain be cleared before he's approached, as he has then a better chance of understanding and accepting what we have to offer. So all that I just told you is exactly what they're trying to say. It doesn't, to just agree just to get past this moment because someone told you got to do this, that's not enough if you want to grow. So you need to understand what we're talking to you about and what the cost to you may be, and then you, okay, I can do that. And we do it, you know, we're not saints, we're willing to grow, yeah? Okay, so that all makes sense now? So I'm going to jump from there to the letter they're warning you is coming, which is the expanded text of Dr. Silkworth. And where I'm going to start at the bottom of that page, it says, of course, an alcoholic ought to be freed from his physical craving for liquor. So what's he talking about? Any of you have an intention not to drink at all, not to pick up no matter what? And then you thought, well, what would it hurt to have just one? And then kind of overshot the mark and don't really know how many you had after that? Okay, so what you didn't know about your condition, perhaps, is that you're going to experience, once you ingest it, you're going to experience a craving beyond your mental control, and you're either going to be miserable or you're going to indulge it, and when you do, all bets are off. Does that make sense to anybody? Okay, and they said before psychological measures can be of maximum benefit. So they're going to give me some clinical tools to watch my thoughts and monitor my behaviors and see when I'm out of step, but first, they got to be able to reach me intellectually and in my core. Yes? So we believe, and so suggested a few years ago, on these chronic alcoholics as a manifestation of an allergy. What do they mean when it's a manifestation of an allergy? I know someone has an allergy by the way they react to the allergy. Right? So that manifestation is the way we behave contrary to what would be in good interest, our own interest, once we ingest, yes? Did any of you drinker used long beyond the time when you knew it wasn't working out well for you? Okay. So there you go. I have to be very careful with the phrases. As I've told you before, we're very literal in our fellowships. And I said one time, have you ever taken in more than you intended? And I had a guy say, I've never taken in more than I intended. And I have to own that. I don't think I did either. So the phenomenon of craving is limited to this class and never occurs in the average temperate drinker. So what class? The chronic alcoholic. What does chronic mean? Yeah, a little frequency to it. Okay. And they said how many times it occurs? It never occurs in the average temperate drinker. So they haven't told you that they've deduced from this, if you're there, that you're alcoholic, but they have said if you're reading this book and that's ever occurred to you, you are not temperate. Because it never occurs in the temperate. Does that make sense? These allergic types can never safely use alcohol in any form at all, and once having formed the habit and found they cannot break it. Have you formed a habit that you have found you cannot break? And not everyone wants to admit to that, but that's cool. And once having lost their self-confidence, have you started, or did you at some point realize, at least even if you didn't admit it outwardly, that this is going to be harder than I thought? I might really be in trouble. Any of you ever have those thoughts? Their reliance upon things human. How many of you thought just because you cared about somebody in your life desperately, that you're going to be able to stop for them? How many of you found that was not true? How many of you just knew that you had all kinds of skills and abilities and you were just going to straighten up and fly right from here on out? That's the guy that you'll hear say, I choose to do different. And I support your choice, but why didn't you do it before you burned the fucking house down? I mean, if you're going to try and prove your sanity to me, why did I meet you after 10 years in the penitentiary to make this choice? Ooh, that one hit, didn't it? They're like, screw him. All right. So it says their piles pile up on them and become astonishingly difficult to solve. Have you had that experience? Yeah. Astonishingly, yeah? So then they talk about how we receive messages. Frothy emotional appeal seldom suffices. How many of you have had people beg you? If you loved me, you'd stop. If you had any self-respect, you'd just stop. Have you heard any of that? What did you think? You're absolutely right. And I hope you're not easily disappointed. All right? So it says, the message which can interest and hold these alcoholic people must have depth and weight. When they talk about that, it's not the gnarly things that happen to me and comparing my gnarly to your gnarly. I got to hit you in your feelers. I got to talk to your spirit from my spirit. And I've got to speak to you truth that you recognize in truth when you have no idea what you heard me say. Some of you just had that experience just now because I felt you do it, right? So why do you think we record these? From the beginning, we recorded them because people would say, you said this. I didn't say that. You heard that. Because the very power in me that's transmitting to you knows what you can receive. So you hear what you can learn from, and I speak what I can learn from. Does it make sense? Which is why it's a good idea for us to share in this experience, because we all get out together. All right. Now I went crazy. Okay. So I want to jump from there to the bottom of that page. It says men and women drink essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol. Is that true for you? But that doesn't make you an alcoholic. That makes you a man or a woman. So everybody drinks for effects, But what we're talking about is the effect it has on me is different. And I live in a world where I think I'm having the same experience they are, or they're having the same experience as I am, and so I can't understand my own behavior even though I'm seeing how aberrant it is in my circle. Any of you had that experience? The sensation is so elusive that while they admit it injurious, they cannot, after a time, differentiate the true from the false. How many of you got there? How many of you had a relapse and then wanted to convince everybody that it was all going good for you? It's not that uncommon of an experience. I had a buddy of mine that he's a musician in Texas, and he called me one day. He's 10 years sober. He called me. He goes, dude, I just heard from whoever, and he told me he was out and he was having a great time. He goes, it really disturbs me. I don't know what to do with it. And I said, what do you mean what to do with it? And he goes, well, sometimes I'm not having a great time. I said, well, here, let's just think that through. When's the last time you had a great time after you went out and got a little crack? He goes, oh, I don't even remember when I had a good time doing that. I said, okay. So are you asking me why he said it, or are you asking me if it was true? And then he said, oh, I wanted to know if it was true, and I know it's not true. See, we support each other with, when the schemes start going, we'll believe anything. So we need to talk to somebody, the importance of fellowship, if we can't get it set, and say, is this true? And that's why I did an inventory, the facts about me. I know it's not true. I can show you how myself manifests. I won't be hurt as well, will I? All right, we're back. All right. So, what did I do then? Well, men and women, the sensation is so elusive that while they admit it injurious, they cannot, after a time, differentiate the true from the false. To them, their alcoholic life seems the only normal one. Did you get there? Yep. What is life beyond addiction? When we're in it, there is none. Right? Because we can't see beyond it. It says they are restless, irritable, and discontented unless they can again experience the sense of ease and comfort which comes at once by taking a few drinks. Drinks which they see others taking with impunity. So I need to know that I'm different and not in a good way with regard to my relationship with alcohol. Because we like to be different when it's in a good way. I want to be better than. In some instances, I want to be worse than. Anyone know what I'm talking about? But in this instance, when I see you seemingly having fun, I don't want to be different than that. I want to have fun. And what they say to me is until that's removed from me, I'm going to be restless, irritable, and discontented all the time. Any of you had that experience? Oh, yeah. That's the problem with the don't pick up no matter what plan. People who have that plan and affect that plan are not like me. It may look like I don't pick up no matter what, but if I was under that same obsession, there would be no delusion. Because no one guesses when I'm running. They all know. There's billboards. Okay. So, we're going to be seeking ease and comfort, or we're going to be restless, irritable, and discontented. So, they're leading us up to a case why we might want to find our ease and comfort somewhere else than in the chemical that we were chasing. Yes? Right. All right, I'm going to jump from there to, well, let's just go through Bill's story. I have a hard time. I've gone through this in different ways a lot of times, but usually by the time we get into rooms like this, we've had a lot of clinicians work with us, and it seems like we take information better from someone, a peer. Bill's a peer. So he's going to tell us a story. Even if it's not a peer to our time, I'll try and take some of the ancient mystery out of it and bring it to current day for you. Because I'm ancient. Not as ancient as Bill, but not as ancient as Sean or Paul either. Okay, so I'm on the top of page 5, And Bill's talking about his crossing over. When I say talking about his crossing over, the time you went from I'm having fun to, oh my God, not again. So he says, liquor ceased to be a luxury, it became a necessity. Bathtub gin, 2 bottles a day and often 3 got to be routine. Sometimes a small deal would net a few $100s and I would pay my bills at the bars and delicatessens. Did any of you do that? Go get on the hook, get a tab, and then stay sick a while, not be able to pay the tab, then be sick enough that you needed to get something in you. So you're going to have to part with what you thought you were going to pay with. No one else had a hustle out there? So I'd pay my bills at the bars and delicatessen. He said this went on endlessly, and I began to waken very early in the morning, shaking violently. Any of you ever do a little shaking?
Oh, yeah. Where you at, Joe?
Huh? Page 5. I'm still in the first paragraph. I'm breaking down. He talks about his experience, and then he talks about what it looks like. Okay? So he said a tumbler full of gin followed by a half dozen bottles of beer would be required if I were to eat any breakfast. Did any drinkers in here? Did you get to the point where food probably would have been a good idea, but you weren't going to hold nothing down until you got something in you to calm it down? And then after you got something in to calm it down, it seemed like, well, that's a waste of that good liquor. I'm not going to eat now. That's kind of the way it rolls, ain't it? So, nevertheless, I still thought I could control the situation. Now he's talking to you about his thought life. I'm running up tabs that I can't pay to put poison in me that I am dying from. I can't wait to get to my next fix and promise somebody else something else that I can't fulfill. I'm so sick I need a drink to eat, and once I drink I don't want to eat. But I got this shit. With him? I still thought I could control it. People try and argue with me that this is not an illness, that it's a choice. And I said, really? Well, I didn't make the decision it was an illness. Learned medical scholars did. But I can tell you that if it were a choice, I picked a poor time to make that choice, because I once owned a vast company and had multiple houses and family and community respect. And I traded all that in for another drink before I made that choice. And if you still believe it's a choice, I suggest you just don't believe in mental illness. That your problem isn't with alcoholism particularly. You don't believe in any mental illness. How many of you have sat around with people with a serious mental illness diagnosis and did not know that about them until you started engaging with them? And because you don't necessarily see our illness on the outside. You don't necessarily see the drivers, yes? Okay. So then it says, gradually things got worse. The house was taken over by the mortgage holder. My mother-in-law died. My wife and father-in-law became ill. So he talks about the experience and then what it looked like. You're relating to him now precisely. That's what it looked like for him. Gradually it got worse. Gradually it meant he lost the house. Mother-in-law died. He was unsupportive of his family. Ugh. Then I got a promising business opportunity. Stocks were at a low point of 1932, and I had somehow formed a group to buy. Any of you in the middle of your addiction get a new opportunity? How many of you went out to celebrate that new opportunity? Missed the opportunity. I was to share generously in the profits, then I went on a prodigious bender, and that chance vanished. So those are words we don't use every day, but most of us have done it. I woke up, this had to be stopped. How many of you woke up? Not even one. It's not safe to have not even a little bump of cocaine at Thanksgiving, nothing. I was through forever. Before then, I had written lots of sweet promises, but my wife happily observed that this time I meant business, and so I did. So how many of you really meant it when you promised until you didn't. Did you find that baffling? Because I really meant it. And then I got an excuse maker that's working full time to cover it when I'm moving forward. And it makes it look like I was disingenuous when I was absolutely genuine when I made the promise I could not keep. And if you're feeling me now, you're experiencing powerlessness, not the theory, the experience. The whole idea of this being the first step is to know when you've gone back into slumber. It has nothing to do with drinking at all. It has to do with thinking. Drinking's just a symptom for someone like me walking asleep in the world. So shortly afterward, I came home drunk. There'd been no fight. How many of you had that happen? So he asked himself this question: where had been my high resolve? Eyesight without insight, spiritual blindness. Did you ever question yourself why, when you were absolutely serious maybe an hour ago, all of a sudden it was gone? Nobody? I'm the only one, huh? Okay. It can be everywhere's Nineveh, chap. It's not always the amen chorus. You lay it out there, and I simply didn't know. It hadn't even come to mind. How many of you have to admit that sometimes you went out on a bender and you really didn't leave to go out on a bender, but that's what turned out, and then when people said, "Why'd you do that?" You're like, "I don't know. Went out to get cigarettes, ended up in Mexico." I don't know. Someone had pushed a drink my way, and I had taken it. Was I crazy? Another question. How many of you went ahead and started using it again, knowing it wasn't a good idea, all the way through doing it, got a little relief, and then all of a sudden got convicted? Oh, what am I, nuts? Yep, would appear so. But the insanity happened before you took it in your body. All the crazy stuff that happened after, that's just the kind of stuff that happens to people like me after I ingest chemicals. Those are circumstances. The insanity was to do it knowing what was likely to happen. Does that make sense? That's why they call it the insanity of the first drink. Which is why the I won't pick up no matter what doesn't work any better on alcoholism than it does on diarrhea. Try it on that condition. Jim says, do not try it on that condition. I began to wonder if for such an appalling lack of perspective seemed being near just that. So they're talking to us about the nature of the insanity. It's appalling lack of perspective. I'm desperately restless, irritable, and discontent. I have to have ease and comfort, and I only know how to get it out here. I have not been shown how to get it from in here. Does that make sense? So renewing my resolve. God, I got this mic all screwed up. You guys should have wired me up better. I'm the one that knocked it off, Jeremy. I'm just messing with you. I tried again. Some time passed, and confidence began to be replaced by cocksureness. So have you ever had that experience? That's when you've been in recovery a week, a month, picked up a chip or two, and pretty soon I got this. You probably had people telling you, you got this. You go, girl. I experienced grace, and I confused it with the illusion of control. That's what happened. It's common. We confuse the experience of grace with the illusion of control. And when the grace comes off a little bit, because it's time to step up my game and I'm supposed to get into practice, I don't know the practices. Does it make sense? That's why fellowship alone is not a good idea if you're anything like me. You need to be program and fellowship. Okay, one day I walked into a cafe to telephone, and in no time I was beating on the bar asking myself how did it happen. How many of you had that happen? Actually had it in you and were getting a little bit loaded before you even gave any conscious thought to it. At the bus stop. With your head under a sheet, sucking on foil. Yeah, we met. As the whiskey rose to my head, I told myself I'd manage better next time, but I might as well get good and drunk then, and I did. Now he's confusing the idea of choice even beyond now that the manifestation of the allergies kicked in. So what I always suggest here is if you still think you have choice at that point, get on the top of the building, jump off. Halfway down, say, I choose to hit the ground. And see if it affects the outcome. Then ask yourself, did that provide comfort? I stay in condemnation because I think I am behaving the way I want to, and I'm now behaving the way alcohol wants me to. Does it make sense? That spirit is driving now. Cocaine, methamphetamine, heroin, fentanyl. That spirit is driving now because I've invited it in. Okay, the remorse, horror, and hopelessness of the next morning are unforgettable. So think about the time that you had some clean time, you knew you were doing better, and then something went off, and you were in it again, and they're telling you to bring to consciousness that remorse, horror, hopelessness. Can you do that? Yeah, some of you are doing that. That's in here, it's to your core. That's the experience of powerlessness and unmanageability. Powerlessness and unmanageability isn't about my externals. My externals are going to look that way because I'm painting it with my thoughts based on my emotions. Does that make sense? The courage to do battle was not there. My brain raced uncontrollably, and there was a terrible sense of impending calamity. Have you ever been there? The mind is just going and going. You're feeling the whole cycle of emotion. You're in a storm. You know you want out of the storm. You cannot calm the storm. People even talking to you will say, look, that's not doing you any good. I know it's not doing me any good. Right back. Have you been there? That's what it is to have your brain race uncontrollably. I hardly dare cross the street lest I collapse and be run down by an early morning truck, for it was scarcely daylight. An all-night place supplied me with a dozen glasses of ale. My writhing nerves were stilled at last. A morning paper told me the market had gone to hell again. Well, so had I. The market would recover, but I wouldn't. Did you go with him on that? He read good news, he could find no good news in it. Have you ever gotten good news and you were so deep in it that you could find nothing good in it? And then what he says to us is, the market would recover, but I wouldn't, and that was a hard thought. How many of you started to become resigned? This is just apparently what I was born for. I did what I did, and now I'm going to do what I do until I don't. Right? So no one's going to reach us now with logic because there is no logic received in that mind. Yes? So it says, should I kill myself? I can end this storm. Or go get more dope than I know my body can tolerate and slam it and we'll pretend it's an overdose. Or for many in this population, I'll just go do something when the cops come. I'm going to arm myself and we'll just let them do it. Right? I'm talking to people who know. So all of these are manifestations of what we do. Right? No, not now. Then a mental fog settled down. Gin would fix that, so 2 bottles in oblivion. So he got to the place in his drinking that he couldn't stop the storm, but he could stop his consciousness. Any of you get there? Yes. All you guys been doing fentanyl, you get there. You get there quick, too. Because there ain't no fun. There ain't no riding the rush and fentanyl. Hit it and... It's not much fun to watch. Anyway, the mind and body are marvelous mechanisms, for mine endured this agony 2 more years. Sometimes I stole from my wife's slender purse when the morning terror and madness were on me. Again, I swayed dizzily before an open window or the medicine cabinet where there was poison, cursing myself for a weakling. Did you get to the point that you were your worst critic? Why am I doing this? Damn it, I know. Did you start to isolate away from everyone that could pull you back? That's what we do. We think we're doing it for their safety, and we probably are, but we're digging deeper, aren't we? So there were flights from city to country and back as my wife and I sought escape, and then came the night when the physical and mental torture were so hellish, I feared I would burst through my window sash and all. Somehow I managed to drag my mattress to a lower floor lest I suddenly leap. A doctor came with a heavy sedative. Next day found me drinking both gin and sedative. How many of you went and got a little? Okay. And then you found out if you could get the combination balanced, it was even better living through chemistry. Any of you ever do that? That's Lance. He used to announce himself as a chemical test pilot. So this combination soon landed me on the rocks. People feared for my sanity, and so did I. I could eat little or nothing when drinking, and I was 40 pounds underweight. My brother-in-law is a physician, and through his kindness and that of my mother, I was placed in a nationally known hospital for mental and physical rehabilitation of alcoholics. Under the so-called belladonna treatment, my brain cleared. Hydrotherapy and mild exercise helped much. Best of all, I met a kind doctor who explained that though certainly selfish and foolish, I had been seriously ill bodily and mentally. We forget to tell people that today. There was no disease declaration back then. This was a doctor operating in his own theories. He was not well thought of in his profession, and a lot of times because of his theories, but he knew that we as a class didn't need any more condemnation. I need an explanation for why when I desperately want to be this guy, I always end up being that guy. And so that's what Bill is describing for you. So it said, it relieved me somewhat to learn that in alcoholics, the will is amazingly weakened when it comes to combating liquor. What are they saying? Willpower might work in other areas of my life, but once I'm dependent, willpower will never be enough. That's their experience. It has been proved out through mine. Not trying to convince you of yours, but the step process may convince it to you. Does it make sense? So, though it often remains strong in other respects, my incredible behavior in the face of a desperate desire to stop was explained. See, he had an explanation for why he was behaving so aberrantly because he once had good earning power. He'd been a war hero. He'd been a business analyst. People paid thousands and thousands of dollars to him for his advice, and now he can't get out of the gutter. It's very, very destabilizing. Any of you ever had all of us have had a better life. We surrendered to these spirits and then try and come back, and we got no credibility. So he says, understanding myself now, I fared forth in high hope. For 3 or 4 months, the goose hung high. This is him demonstrating to you what it looks like to have grace be confused with control. I went to town regularly, even made a little money. Surely this was the answer, self-knowledge. How many of you had a head full of self-knowledge and it worked for a time until it didn't? Okay. But it was not, for the frightful day came when I drank once more. The curve of my declining moral and bodily health fell off like a ski jump. He's painting a picture. How many of you had some clean time, got on a run again, and things not only got bad, but they got bad quick? When you go off a ski jump, you're on the ground, and all of a sudden the ground's way down there. And people watching that say, quit digging. You go, digging, dude, the ground's falling out from under me. I ain't digging. I didn't remember to bring a shovel when I fell in this hole. Besides, I wasn't going in the hole, I was going up. It's very confusing when people don't know what they're seeing and they're talking to the likes of me who clearly doesn't know what I'm seeing. After a time, I returned to the hospital. This was the finish, the curtain, it seemed to me. My weary and despairing wife was informed that it would all end with heart failure during delirium tremens, or I would develop a wet brain perhaps within a year. She would soon have to give me over to the undertaker or the asylum. Did you have anyone medically tell your loved ones that you're going to die soon and you might as well start getting prepared? You need to take care of you because they're lost. I've had my family had that explained to them about me. So if you didn't, then, well, I'm glad you experienced that much grace. They did not need to tell me. I knew and almost welcomed the idea. So his thinking is, I know what they're saying is true, even though I'm going to deny that I know it. Anybody know what I'm talking about? It was a devastating blow to my pride. I, who had thought so well of myself and my abilities and my capacity to surmount obstacles, was cornered at last. Now I was to plunge into the dark, joining the endless procession of sots who'd gone on before. You like that word? No. I thought of my poor wife. There had been much happiness after all. What would I not give to make amends? But that was over now. Did you get into such a state of hopelessness that you thought you had done so much harm you could never, ever make it right? Remember they said the insanity is an appalling lack of perspective. One of the things we forget is there's an entire world of brothers and sisters, sons and daughters, parents that we have responsibility for, not just the ones God placed us with when we got here. And so when you really start doing this, you look around, I'm going to be making amends for the rest of my life to that wife, whether she takes them or not, because I'm going to be lifting up somebody's wife, somebody's daughter, somebody. Does that make sense? We got to get a better tech team. I can't. You know, I can't move too fast. Okay. So, okay. I'm about the bottom of that. So, I'm going to start at the top of 9. Because I'm going to jump. If I don't jump, I'm going to miss something here. So, where am I at? No, bottom of 8. My musing was interrupted by the telephone. The cheery voice of an old school friend asked if he might come over. He was sober. They put that in italics, calling to your attention how odd that is. Did any of you, when you're out there using, have that one friend you kept that no matter how bad I get, at least I'm not that bad? Yeah. So that's who this cat is to him. I'm not that bad. So when Cat calls him, it's weird. Does it make sense? So it was years since I could remember him coming to New York in that condition. I was amazed. Rumor had it that he'd been committed for alcoholic insanity. I wondered how he had escaped. He's trying to describe to you how weird it is that Ebby's even out, much less out free. Of course, he would have dinner, and then I could drink openly with him, unmindful of his welfare. You ever heard about somebody that went and got cleaned up, but you didn't really believe it, and then you saw him again, and you didn't even think about that? Hey, you want to hit, man? Okay, so it's a pretty common experience. Not very supportive, but pretty common. Okay. I thought only of recapturing the spirit of other days. There was that time we had chartered an airplane to complete a jag. His coming was an oasis in this dreary desert of futility, the very thing, an oasis. Drinkers are like that. So if you want to, what is an oasis? It might be a water hole, but more often than not, it's what? It's a mirage. How many of you went and got high again and again and again? And every once in a while, there was a little joy found somewhere. But more often than not, it was a mirage, right? That's all. You're just painting a picture that most of us should know something about. So then they're going to talk about Ebby walking in to see him. The door opened, and he stood there fresh-skinned and glowing. Now think about this drunk describing his buddy as fresh-skinned and glowing, and tell me that that isn't an odd description for one man to speak of another man about. So there's something very different going on, isn't there? There was something about his eyes. He was inexplicably different what had happened. He automatically goes inward because something has happened I cannot comprehend. I pushed a drink across the table. He refused it. Disappointed but curious, I wondered what had got into the fellow he wasn't himself. Have you ever been disappointed but curious? So he's really describing kind of a thing we've been through, isn't he? Come, what's all this about? I queried. He looked straight at me, simply but smilingly. He said, I've got religion. Now, get honest with yourself. I don't care what church you affiliate with or if you affiliate with none. But if you're a church guy or if you're not a church person and you're sitting there drunk and drinking, hoping to recapture early days, and they tell you the difference in religion, the fun meter goes. This is going to suck, right? I was aghast, so that was it. Last summer, an alcoholic crackpot. Now I suspected a little cracked about religion. He had that starry-eyed look. Yes, the old boy was on fire, all right, but bless his heart, let him rant. Besides, my gin would last longer than his preaching. But here's the difference. Here's the difference in peer models, why this whole thing was stood up to be a peer model. He did no ranting. Bill expected ranting. He got no ranting. The reason this was set up the way it was is we're not here to tell you life is easy. We're telling you it's easier with more of us. We're telling you that whatever they told you anywhere else, you're welcome here. Welcome home. If you think... Just trying to show you some things about the life you're living right now and make it equatable to this. Does it make sense? But he did no ranting. In a matter-of-fact way, he told how two men had appeared in court persuading the judge to suspend his commitment. They had told of a simple religious idea and a practical program of action. That was 2 months ago, and the result was self-evident. It worked. So one of the things we don't do that we owe the new people is tell them what we got is a religious idea that God dwells in you. Power dwells in you. And a practical program of action that will prove that fact to you through you. Walk it out. Does that make sense? Why do we deny the new people that? Because we fear what they'll think of us when we say we have a religious idea. Because they want to say, well, I'm spiritual, I'm not religious. I'm not religious either. I'm a human walking in the Spirit. And if I don't do the things that allows me to stay awake and do that, then I do destructive things to myself and others. Does that make sense? So they're entitled to know that I thought God was out there. And while there's plenty of power out there, the power I can access is found in here. And it's power that produces ease and comfort in the world without going out in the world to get it. Handy little trick for an addict of the hopeless variety to know. So don't keep it a secret. Okay. So he had come to pass his experience along to me if I cared to have it. I was shocked but interested. So he's talking about the experience. It obviously worked with him, and he has something to give me, an experience he wants to give me, not a meeting list, not a bunch of information, an experience. And what he's saying is, well, I'd like it, but tell me more. Any of you got shown what the program of recovery was and had someone obvious and you're like, let me get back to you. I'm going to consider this. Goes on to talk about how certainly I was interested, I had to be, for I was hopeless. So upon reflection, I'm going to have to wrap up. But what I want you to understand is what happened. The reason he went to some lengths to talk about what a different experience is, that's his encounter with power. That was his encounter with the first miracle. The reason Ebby looked so different, he didn't hear anything Ebby said after that. It was all the absolute confirmation that he could too be different, because he knew. There was a miracle was sent to his door. Does that make sense? Which is why he didn't see the human, he saw the Spirit. That's why he describes it that way. That's it, guys. Next week we'll talk about that encounter for you.